With us right now is Italy's central bank governor, Ignazio Visco. Mr. Visco, thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Tell us your priorities here at the G20 meeting.
Well, priorities really is to try to assess what is the condition of our economies at a global level. We have seen clearly a slowdown, and we have to understand whether this slowdown is a permanent feature that we will have to deal with for some period, or whether this is just a temporary and we return next year to higher growth, say more normal. It is not clear the assessment yet. We still have to wait and see what are the developments that will follow from the current conditions in Ukraine and the conflict there. And so basically my assessment is that we have confirmed what we had, the conclusions we had reached in the last meeting in Washington in April.
In terms of the possibility of a recession, do you feel there could be a global recession?
Well, first of all, I think that we can avoid a recession. There are no hints of a global recession, and those countries where monetary policy has to be in the restrictive mode can avoid having a recession. We call, in the economic jargon, a soft landing. And I think we are still in that realm of possibilities.
Right. I would like to ask you about the possibility of further rate hikes by the European Commission, by the European Central Bank. Are you favoring more rate hikes?
Well, first of all, we have been raising rates at a very high speed and for a magnitude which is really consistent in the last year. 4 percentage points is the change with respect to June 2021. This has followed a pattern which has reduced over time. First 75 basis points, then a sequence of 50s, then a sequence of 25. We might have something still to go, but my impression is that we are close to the peak. The question is not really how high it will be, but how long we will maintain our rates in restrictive territory in order to achieve a price stability target that we fix at 2% in the medium term.
Do you feel that we've done enough with rate hikes now? Further hikes could start impacting the economy negatively?
Well, first of all, I think we might have something more, but not much. I think we have to wait and have the effects of monetary policy decisions, that is the rate hikes, to take place, because monetary policy acts with lags. And so we still have to have the full effect in the transmission of monetary policy changes, of interest rates hikes. We have already seen hikes in the credit market. We have seen that the credit conditions have deteriorated and that demand for credit has substantially been reduced. Now it's basically flat, but the effect of that on demand still has to come. We have observed mostly an inflation due to cost pushes from the energy side in Europe, much more than elsewhere, because of the natural gas, which has really had a massive increase. This has been passed through to final prices, so the core inflation is still a little bit stubborn, but my impression is that as energy prices have dramatically fallen now, we probably should observe a come down of these core inflation. There are risks. One of the risks is food prices due to what was still happening in Ukraine.
So when do you expect inflation to start coming down?
Well, we have already seen inflation coming down. It is now between 5 and 5.5% in headline. The core inflation is more or less similar, so my impression is that by the autumn we will start seeing a substantial reduction in that rate.
I would like to ask you about your outlook for growth for Europe and for the world, and key challenges for the global economy?
Well, first of all, Europe, as you may know, is stagnant. Maybe some technical recession we have seen on average, with some countries particularly resilient, and among them Italy is one of them. These countries have the benefit of a substantial increase in service demand, which compensates or more than compensates the fall in manufacturing. The reduction in manufacturing is the consequence of the global slowdown. So in this sense, globally there is a substantial reduction with respect to what we expected a year ago, or perhaps even a little before the Russian invasion to Ukraine. And my feeling and our projections is that this slowdown will remain. We started with that in our discussion, in our conversation. It will remain for a few months. Probably next year it will not be a buoyant year. In Europe, the same. The strength in the service sector is mostly the result of the end of social distancing from COVID-19.
Right.
It is the use of accumulated savings, which were forced by the impossibility really to consume in 2021, and it might continue for a few months, notwithstanding the terrible weather conditions that we are experiencing also in Europe due to climate change.
Right. I would like to ask you about cooperation at the G20 when it comes to debt restructuring. Are you seeing any sort of strong movement, or do you feel there is lack of consensus and the negotiations on debt restructuring have been slow? Do you think China has been playing a positive role or not yet?
I think that we still need substantial diplomatic efforts. And I think this is something that we have to engage in on a wide scale. Obviously, there are problems in a number of areas, be that climate finance, be that the value chains, and also on this, we have to be honest, there is a difficulty. But I'm confident that continuing a dialogue will bring home results that in the time being are difficult to achieve.
Right. On cryptocurrencies, the Financial Stability Board came out with its report yesterday saying that there must be very strict accountability measures, disclosure norms, redemption norms for cryptocurrencies and stable coins. How do you see this? Do you think the G20 will come to a consensus on a cryptocurrency framework?
I think more or less this discussion is shared. The Financial Stability Board, I am a member of both the general and the restricted, the steering group of the FSB. We discussed this. Even the Bank of Italy is making a number of analytical analysis. My view is that we have to distinguish. There are cryptocurrencies that really have no backing and no intrinsic value, and we should refrain from really encouraging. I mean, we should encourage people to be very careful with these. And there are cryptocurrencies, stable coins, which have some value. We have to, as it is in the report, be very clear on the risks and how to minimize the risks in their use, especially in the payments.
All right. Mr. Visco, thank you so much for being here.
It was nice meeting you.
Lovely meeting again.